How long does it take to raise the capital once you have all your documents and everything ready? That is a really killer and tactical question that a lot of syndicators and would-be fund managers ask us as they're getting rolling, putting together their documents and starting to organize themselves to get this really high quality investor capital through the private placement process. The answer is it depends. I mean, there are some people who raise their money in 2 days because they've got it all lined up. And there are other people that struggle for a long time. So you really want to try to push yourself toward that earlier phase group of people. Let's talk about things like momentum and the way that this whole thing works. First, understand that private placements expire. And the private placement, remember, the word place means to sell. So private placement is a private sale of stock. So you're selling stock privately, and the offering has to expire. And it expires either based on when you hit your maximum, and we do mini-max offerings for our funds. So it expires when you hit the maximum. In other words, you can't sell any more stock because the amount that you said you were going to sell is now all sold out. Or it expires because a clock has hit and there's a certain date time frame where you can't sell anymore. And these things really do two things. One is Bernie Madoff, he just sold and sold and sold and sold. There was no end to what he was doing. Investors really would prefer to know that there's a certain number of shares being sold. There's a certain time frame that they're going to be sold in. That's it, and we're done. And that's the way that we do our offerings. And each attorney might set them up in a different way, but that's the way that we do ours. So you want to think about that and understand that they expire. So number one, there's a time frame, and you have to operate inside the time frame. But here's the thing. It takes a certain amount of time for the attorney to put all the documents together once you give the attorney all the instructions about how you want your offering to be put together. Now, that may sound funny to some people, but you don't just call the attorney like you're doing an eviction and say, hey, do me a favor, would you evict the guy in apartment 13? You have to give the attorney the instructions that you want the attorney to follow when they're putting the documents and the deal together. If you don't do that, you're going to get whatever they give you, and that may be somewhat of a boilerplate type deal, and that might not work for you. So you want to clearly specify what it is that you're doing, put your information out there, and it's going to take that attorney some amount of time to put that together for you. Now, while that's happening, you should start shopping for investors, looking for people who are interested in what you're doing. Now, you can't sell them the securities because you don't have the offering documents, and you don't want to sell anything or take any money until you have those legal documents that enable you to make that happen. So you want to be a little careful that you don't cross the line of actually selling the securities without your documents. But at the same time, you kind of want to salt the oats, and you want to get people ready and warmed up, and as I like to say, preheat the oven. So you want to kind of get people warmed up. So here's what I would do. I would start a spreadsheet. I'd start it right now, and I would say, these are people that are interested. Yeah, they're not committed. They're just interested. And whenever I'm talking to somebody, I say, listen, you sound like you're pretty interested. I'd like to be able to come back to you when we have the documents, which is, let's say, going to be in 30 or 40 days or whatever the time frame is. Are you open to that? Yes. Okay, great. If this looks like the kind of thing that's interesting for you, is there a ballpark number of dollars that might work for you? And, well, what are the choices? Well, the minimum is 50, maximum is $1 million. Let's say you have some offering guidelines about how you're going to operate with the people. But the average people tend to put in somewhere between 100 and 300. People like to be average, so they might say, 100, 200, that works for me. That's great. And so then you mark down 100, 200 on your spreadsheet, and you kind of get an idea about how many people might be interested in your offering as you're moving forward. And my guess is that about 25% of whatever you mark down will eventually end up coming through. So if you need to raise $1 million, you probably need to have a pipeline of about 4 million to make sure that you're going to probably come close to your goal. Otherwise, you're going to fall short. So you really want to lay that out. And the better job you do of organizing people in advance before you get your docs and kind of teeing them up, just telling them your ideas, telling them what you're working on, get them to understand your background, get them to understand your track record and what makes you somebody who's going to likely to be successful. If you do that properly, then when you go back to the investors, then you send them an email. Hey, listen, we have our executive overview. We have our marketing materials. We have our offering documents. We have everything that we need. And by the way, your offering documents are not marketing materials. They're legal documents that are designed to scare investors away from doing your deal, so that if something goes wrong and they come back, then you can say, listen, we told you everything that you need to know. The marketing materials are separate and different, so don't confuse those things. But you can put those things into the marketplace as they come from the attorney, and everything that's part of the package that investors see needs to go to the attorney, because they're all considered to be part of the offering. So you want to make sure that your attorney is reviewing everything and blessing all of your docs and making sure that everything is just right the way that you and that attorney want it to be. So you can start passing that material to the clients, the prospects, as your materials come out and are ready. And then when the documents come back, the final private placement documents, which is the private placement, the operating agreement, the subscription agreement, you can give it to the investor, who then can sign on and wire the money and so forth. So the process, if you have everybody all teed up, you can create a lot of momentum, and you can move very, very fast, and you can have people start wiring money as soon as a couple of days. If you don't have things lined up, then you could end up taking a long time. And especially if you're doing a mini-max offering, you want to have that money come in pretty fast so you can create some momentum. Because what you're going to find out is when people say, well, how much have you raised so far? Well, I haven't raised any. It's a little harder to get them to give the first couple of dollars. That's why in a mini-max, the attorney or an escrow holder holds the money at first. And you want to make sure that you break your escrow and you hit your minimum pretty fast, so you can go buy some initial real estate and get some momentum going for your deal. And once you do that, and if you do it properly, then more money will start coming as you talk to new people, because you'll be able to point out to new people, hey, listen, we're working on this deal, and we're working on this and closing that. And the more momentum you have, the more likely people are to push forward and go with you. So think about that. Think about your momentum, and think about putting together a sheet that tracks your prospects, and start asking people questions about exactly what they want to do and how they want to move forward with you. It will go a long way. It will help you, and it'll make this business work just the way it's supposed to work. And it is a great business. So go out and stake your claim.